everyone, and welcome to the last episode of Lexclusive for 2024. As always, I'm your host, Nancy. I'm the Client Relations Manager here at PaperStreet, and today I'm joined by our Content Director, Allison. Hi, Allison. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we're going to keep it a little short, but we're also going to do some things that'll be very, very helpful for you in 2025 and just really all the years to come because content always has and always will be one of the most important aspects of your website and your marketing. So, with that in mind, we've decided to talk about 10 important tips that you need to keep in mind for when you're creating law firm content. Now, this is any form of content. We've done our podcasts on blogs before, but this one's actually going to talk more about the website as a whole, and it truly applies to every kind of firm. You know, a lot of lawyers will come to us and say, well, no, I'm a corporate defense firm, so it's different. Or no, I'm a PI firm, so it's different. I'm a family law firm. We understand that. There is some different kinds of approaches, different kinds of techniques that you're going to use when you are talking to different audiences with different claims. That being said, no matter what areas of law you're in, no matter what area of the country you're in, there are going to be some universal truths. Okay. And the first one that Alice and I are definitely going to talk about on a gigantic level is just when you're creating this content, please speak to your audience, not other lawyers, not someone with a law degree, but someone who's going to be hiring you. And Allison, what would you say is the first few steps of that part?
So generally, you got to tone down the type of verbiage you're using. No, we call it legalese. So nothing legalese, nothing you would see in like a legal textbook. You're going to want to use kind of normal everyday language to, convey your message. Generally, maybe think like, 8th grade reading level kind of stuff. So I think keeping things simple in terms of the word choice you're using is going to make a big difference.
Absolutely. And it's even more than that. So, first of all, no matter what you're talking about, it has to be talked down to your audience. Even if you're marketing to a general counsel or another large corporation, that doesn't mean they understand the law inside and out. So, as Allison said, no legalese, speak to your client. And then, if you can take it a step further, remember to humanize your content. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily have to happen everywhere on your site, but just come up with content in a way that talks directly to who you're speaking to and gives them a chance to get to know you and gets to take a look and see what it is that you do. And I'll share my screen for a very quick example. But we've created this bio. It's a favorite of ours, but it's a family law firm. And you can see by looking at this picture, you can see that not only did they interject both the professional look to their photography, but also gives you a chance to look at some of their hobbies and things like that. It has an important quote that means something to them. And then it incorporates what her hobby is with her tagline. And then it gives a true story of who she is as an attorney. So it's not just, I went to this law school, I have this award. It's not just that. But she actually injected some personality into her bio and things like that. It's still professional. It still conveys how and why she'll be a great attorney for you. And yet it connects with your audience. It connects with who you're speaking to. So in a way that not only will they know they'll win my case, but I also know who I'm hiring on more than just this is where they went to law school level. All right, so that's our first step of our top 10 list of things to talk about. And the next one, Allison, is going to be talking about one page for each claim. Now, this is something that our lawyers make the mistake of a lot, but could you break that down for us?
So when you're kind of planning out the pages on your website, it's important that each page represent one of your practice areas. We sometimes we say you need to have a page for everything that's keeping your lights on, all that practice work that's paying your bills, and then anything you want to expand into. So often that's going to look like a sitemap that has lots of different pages. So you can see if we're targeting airbag defects, right? That's going to break up into a ton of different subsets of content. You can create different pages for all those different types of airbag defects, right? We're talking about late deployment, side airbag, non-deployment issues. And not only does it give you an opportunity to create more content, right? Because now I can fill all of these pages with, 2,000 plus words, but it helps create a place for someone to land that might be making those really niche and like narrow, long keyword phrase type queries into Google. Another way you can kind of see this is in the site architecture. We have these main practice areas. These are things we call page lane level ones, right? Your main pages, car accidents, personal injury, and then all your level twos and sometimes level threes and even fours to support that initial content. You should be breaking things up into smaller sections so that you can go more in depth about each topic, expand that word count. You don't need to put everything about car accidents on one page.
Absolutely. And it's really important too, because a lot of times what we see that our law firms do is a lot of times they in their head will lump things together. So, for example, they'll talk about child custody and child support on the same page. But
Right.
the thing is you have to realize that everybody's looking for instantaneous information, number one. So, just fast facts, if they see child support and child custody, they may say, I don't need custody issues. I have that covered. I need support. And they may just be inclined to zone out or just go somewhere else that describes child support more in depth, because to them, it's different. You yourselves may lump them together, but that doesn't mean your client will. And then another important point is for an SEO perspective, search engine optimization. When you lump things together, your site will not perform well in search either, because it's not going to see a clear division of your content. And again, a lot of our firms will tell us, I don't need SEO. I don't care about SEO. My clients come to us from word of mouth. That's fine. And we respect that. And you may not need SEO to enhance your marketing. But that being said, it's what I tell all of our clients when I have their marketing evaluations with me. It's like, why would you do anything to harm SEO if you can do something to avoid it? So, like I said, it's very easy to divide up the content. You don't have to do really tricky breakdowns or anything like that. Child support, child custody, two completely different claims. Bicycle accidents, motorcycle accidents, completely different claims. There's going to be different laws governing them, things like that. So just really think about, well, if they were in a motorcycle accident, they're not in a bicycle accident, so make them separate. If they were in a hit and run accident, they weren't in a drunk drive. Well, drunk driving may have been a hit and run, but it could be a hit and run versus a side T-bone crash. They're different. So, like I said, you have to just break it down both so that your audience knows they know your topic well, that you can describe it to them, they understand why they have a claim. And then again, the side bonus of you'll also rank better in Google by doing it that sort of way. Because again, you don't may not care about SEO, but that doesn't mean you should do anything to harm your SEO.
Right.
Which is funny because I'm going to segue into number three, which is to have the very basic SEO principles on your website. Again, I'm not going to repeat myself, but it's the truth. You're not going to want to do anything to hurt yourself with SEO. And there is so many what I call hidden SEO tricks that you could apply to your website so it doesn't have that cliche wording to it or anything like that. And the three components that really matter for SEO that you're going to consider with any content that you're writing on your site is going to be your H1, your title tags, your meta descriptions, and then subsequent headings. All right. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. For those of you watching the video, you can see it. And if you're listening to the podcast, I'll do my best to explain this for you as well. But if I share my screen, you'll see that I use a tool called a MozBar. Okay, it's free and anybody could use it, and it shows you what you're using, what you're looking at on your website. So right now, like I said, if you're listening and not watching, I've pulled up a family law page. It's a domestic violence page. All right. Now, for this, we have something that's called your page title. Your page title says Massachusetts Domestic Violence Lawyers, and it lists the name of the firm, O'Connor Family Law. Now, that is what's actually going to show up on Google if somebody Googles a family lawyer or domestic violence lawyer in Massachusetts. So that's the heading that pops up. And that is optimized for SEO. It shows what you're practicing in, where you're practicing it in, and it uses the magical word phrases of lawyers. Now, nowhere on your website do you see this. This is only what shows up in Google. And the same thing is true of a meta description. Your meta description is the summary that appears on Google when somebody's looking for you. So in this firm, it says Massachusetts domestic violence lawyers dedicated to protecting your rights and ensuring your safety. Get the legal support you need today. So it's two sentences. It's very short, but it shows exactly what you're doing. It promises something to your clients. It's saying we can ensure your safety. And if somebody saw this as their search results for you, it sounds exactly like the kind of thing that they're looking for if they conducted a search for domestic violence lawyers in Massachusetts or something similar. And again, those don't show up on your website. They don't show up that anyone could see them and say, oh, you're using SEO or anything like that. It's just what's going to show up on Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, things like that. And then segueing for that with the SEO techniques is the use of headings. Now, here again, headings matter for SEO, especially your H1. That being said, these headings are also important website division techniques for how your content will appear. So for those of you, like I said, looking at the video, you can see that the page title for this is Massachusetts Domestic Violence Lawyers. So that's also the H1. So it's a common sense use of the title and an H1. So the H1 is what Google's going to be looking for, but it also is the page title for somebody who's navigating your site and looking to see what you do. And then here you see the smaller headings, the H1, the H2 headings, which break up your content. So these break up your content, find a trusted domestic violence lawyer, if you're afraid of your spouse, legal resources, things like that. So it divides up the content in an understandable way. It helps somebody figure out what you're talking about. Somebody could skim it to see what you're talking about. And it is those magical phrases to Google to show that your page is on the proper topics. So, like I said, there's a million reasons to have these title tags, meta descriptions, headings, things like that, and they'll enhance your SEO while you're at it. So, really, it's a foolproof way to benefit your website without going the cliche SEO route if that's not for you. That being said, SEO is great for marketing, so it's definitely something to consider if you're open to it.
Absolutely.
All
Yeah.
right. Moving on to number 4. Allison, let's talk about having some personality on your pages. We spoke about this a little bit in number 1, but let's inject this a little bit more so that somebody really understands what we're talking about here.
I think, emotion and humanizing your content and sometimes even your design, it can play, and, photos can play a good role in this, is one of the best ways to connect with people who are looking at multiple lawyers, right? So if you're looking to get organic traffic, meaning, not your neighbor said, hey, you should hire attorney Jane, but somebody who's just typing into Google and looking for lawyers, they're likely looking at more than one website at a time. Maybe they open 3 or 4 at a time and then they choose one. And so you have a small window of opportunity to connect with that person in some way. And usually and often this is more common towards, plaintiff's firm, but typically the best way to do that is to appear or to showcase your humanity in some way. And the best way to do that, the easiest way to do that is through bios, though that's certainly not the only way to do it. I want to share an example of one of my favorite bios. This entire firm does a really good job humanizing what they do for a living. And their bios is one of the best ways to do that. They have this great headline here that's custom for every attorney, personalized to kind of like their own mission statement. We have a really cool kind of word bubble here that tells things about their lawyer life, but also their personal life. And again, this has changed for each person, so it's different. Their bios, some of them are in first person, which could be a whole nother conversation and debate whether or not that's a good decision for you, but it does kind of change the actual tone of the biography. And then we have featured quotes and also videos. So all of these things kind of come together to show you really more about him as a person. And it could even be so much as like, oh, he's a New York Giants fan and I'm a New York Giants fan. It sounds so silly, but that literally could be the factor that someone says, oh, I'm going to pick Mr. Scott over, Miss Jane down the street. This website also, I think, does a really great job with emotion. So a lot of times we think human and we think, okay, biographies, you have to share something personal about yourself. And that's true. And that's a very common way to do it. But you can also kind of tap into how the person who's going to hire you is feeling when they're making that phone call. They could be grieving, they could be really mad, they could be scared, they may be like frustrated, and tapping into whatever that emotion is and drafting content around that speaks specifically to that really like niche emotion makes a big difference. So here we have this fighting for your ideal ending, right? And they have all these great little points about, you want to make sure what happens to your family never happens to anybody else. You just want someone to hear your story and say, yeah, that person did something wrong. They did something bad. Tapping into all of these kind of emotional motivators is a really great way to propel your content and make it stand out against all the other law firms, that offer the same services that you do. And we love to do this. We love when attorneys come to us and they have this kind of big drive to, do something that's a little more people focused. It really is a good differentiating factor.
That's so true, Allison, because a lot of times people talk about white coat syndrome, that people are afraid of doctors and things like that. But the thing is that it's exactly what Allison said. Lawyers also have a negative stereotype. A lot of people think lawyers can't be trusted. A lot of people think lawyers just want their money, things like that. So when you interject the client into your content and get creative with your messaging, and really, like this website Allison picked up was perfect. You want to be heard and understood. That's the truth, because like I said, somebody's going to say, yes, I do want to be heard and understood. So it's not just tooting your own horn with your bio, but it's also addressing your client and making them feel like they're not just a number to you, that you're not just going to display them on your client successes page, that you're really going to fight for them. And like I said, so many of these cases really do matter for that. Like I said, whether Allison said, like I said, it's just a connection like the Giants, or it's just they felt comfort with your website. So don't be afraid to use a tone to your story. And that's, like I said, one of the things that PaperStreet does, like I said, and hopefully whoever you use, we hope it's PaperStreet, but we do things like creative messaging, and like we do brand discovery and things like that. So that way you're not just a law firm putting up a website saying, here, I hope people click on it. You're really taking your clients into a consideration and putting that creative spin onto it. And then Allison, let's jump into the next one, which actually really connects to this really well, because a lot of times when you're creating a website to speak to your audience, they're going to have questions. Okay, that's why they're searching to begin with. They're not just direct dialing you for your firm, things like that. They want to know their frequently asked questions. And again, every person's different, every case is different, but some things will always come up no matter what for the practice areas that you're representing. So let's talk about FAQs, Allison.
Yeah, FAQs, I mean, really, it's a direct street to, an SEO best practice, but it also serves the purpose of just simply answering questions, right? And often, if you're the person that can answer the question, they're going to pick up the phone and dial your phone number. If you can really answer their question, we hate answering questions with just more junk and fluff. If you can actually put the true answer in there, you're going to have, a higher likelihood of that conversion. But FAQs can make pages really long. And, going back to taking into consideration what the page looks like and being able to break pages up with headers, a great way to fit those FAQs into a page is to kind of stack them at the bottom with these great expanding collapse fields. We use this across our websites all the time. It's a great way to be able to answer the questions, quickly see, the answer without kind of bloating the page to this like long, gigantic scroll. But your FAQs, when you're planning out what you should ask, right? This should be a really easy thing, because if you don't know what the most frequently asked questions are, you need to go talk to your receptionist or your paralegal or the person that's, answering the phone calls, because they're going to have an answer. They're likely being asked the same set of 5 or 6 questions each time. And those are the questions you need to type out. And those are the answers you need to type out, the true answers. If you're looking to do it from a Google perspective, the people also ask on Google is kind of like that direct link to making Google happy. You take those questions and you type out your own true real answer. We sometimes will take the question literally verbatim, copy it right from the people also ask, and then write our unique answer to that question that is truly an answer. So FAQs have a place on every website, whether or not you are SEO driven.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I used, because I used to be the SEO content person for PaperStreet before I segued over into this. And one of the things that I would always tell people is make sure your FAQs are on the same page of what they're talking about, because you don't want 7,000 clicks to get them where they need to go. So you're not going to want to have a page, well, this is how you file a claim. This is your statute of limitations. This is this, and have that person click, 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 click. You're going to lose them that way, because nobody thinks that way anymore. We're all used to having the information at our fingertips. So that's why it's really good to do things like Allison said, to have the expanding collapse. Now, if you're fully SEO driven, you may need to write everything out, and that may be something you need to embrace. But if you can use those expanding collapse to make the page look neater and cleaner. There are ways to do that. So, like I said, when you're doing this sort of thing, again, you don't have to work with PaperStreet, we hope you do, but talk to the person who's designing your site so that they could come up with a way to have the information on your page in a clean way so that people can find what they're looking for on that same page. It presents a full picture, but it doesn't look cluttered or, 12,000 words on a page that has no page breaks or anything like that. Now, that being said, there are going to be times when you need to send them to a different page. So, for example, like I said, if we're using the car accident mentality a lot because car accidents is very easy for people to follow. But for example, you're going to have an overall car accident page. You're going to have talk about auto accidents. You're going to talk about statute of limitations. You're going to talk about damages, things like that. But you can internally link or link that person to other portions of your site. And when they do that, you can send it them to your contact form so that once they've read the information, they can contact you directly. You can internally link it to your bio. So they're reading about a car accident and then see who's the lawyer who's handling that case. Or if they're reading that page and they're like, you know what, I want to look specifically because yes, I was in a car accident, but it was an Uber accident. What happens if it's an Uber accident? And you link them to that Uber accident. So, in other words, you help that user experience, you help that journey in order to make the person do that so they can know where to go. They follow the steps on the website that you've created for them. And that way they know what it is to go and what it is to do that. And one of the things that, like I said, just to quickly share my screen for those of you who are watching the video, is that you can very easily do this. On PaperStreet, we build our websites in WordPress. And adding an internal link is so very easy. And I think a lot of people get intimidated. Well, how do I link to the other pages of my site? All you have to do is you highlight when you're in WordPress or whatever word tool you're using, your CMS should allow for this sort of thing. Again, we recommend WordPress, but whatever way. So, for example, I'm looking at a podcast post that I had posted for the last month we had done this. And you can see that I highlighted this type, the appearance of your website. And there's a little button here. It looks like a chain and it's a link. And what you're doing is whenever you want to link something, you highlight it, click on the little chain, and you direct it to whatever page of the website you want it to go to. Now, this also could work if you're using external links, like if you're showing them data or something like that. But it's important to remember that if you're sending them elsewhere, like if you're linking to an accident statistics report or something like that, there is an option for you to option open it in a different window. So when you're doing that, if you want to open it in a different window, that means that somebody will still stay on that page, but can look to your other site because you don't want to lose them. You don't want to send them to the other site and then have them get confused. If it's your own website, you don't really need to open it into a new tab because technically they could just go forward and link back by hitting the forward and back button. But a new site, you're going to want to make sure that it opens in a new window. So, like I said, it's very easy. Highlight, click the chain, insert the link, and you're very good to go. So, like I said, it's a very easy step to do. It'll take you maybe 5 minutes to make sure that your pages are linked properly. And it really makes a difference with creating that user journey for your users. And once again, it's an SEO benefit. So if you can get SEO benefits, then you absolutely should. All right, our next tip that we need to talk about is the fact that, again, we were just talking about your own website. Don't get such tunnel vision that you judge the web success of your website by the success of your website. Don't just look at your site, say, yes, this is fantastic. I have done a really great website and feel like you're out there. I don't know why I'm not ranking anymore. I don't know why clients have stopped looking, things like that. Because what you have to realize with content is that people who have active marketing campaigns are always adding new content. They just are. They have monthly blogs, they have practice areas that are expanding and things like that. So it's really always important that you take a look at who your competitors are for their practice areas. Now, I don't just mean the people that you think are the ones taking your claims from you. So, for example, if you're a Smith law firm and you say, well, if they don't hire me, they tend to hire Jones law firm. Yes, you should look at Jones law firm, but you also need to do a Google search and see who's showing up in search, not because you care about SEO. If you do care about SEO, then yes, you should do that. But even if you're just one of those word of mouth firms, say, I don't need to do it, you need to make sure that you're providing the same amount of trust with your website that other firm is doing. Because if they're breaking down claims specifically, then they'll say, "Oh, I know they handle my EEOC claim. So that site has more information about EEOC, so I'm going to hire them." It creates a false sense of security if they have the content and you don't. They're going to be go to the site that has the content when you don't. And like I said, it's the kind of thing too where a lot of lawyers get so pigeonholed and they're like, "Oh yeah, I have a med malpractice page. Med mal is important to me, and I that's all I need to do is because I talked about med mal on that page." Well, we have an SEO client that does really, really well with SEO for MedMal because they constantly are breaking down and showcasing different claims for MedMal. So if I pulled that site up for those of you who are listening, you don't see this. However, you can see that if there was a competitor in Montana or Wyoming where this law firm looks, and I say, well, they're always beating me for medical malpractice. Why is that? They don't just have that medical malpractice page. You can see they have surgical errors, pharmacy errors, chiropractor, podiatric, nursing malpractice, cerebral palsy, anesthesia, things like that. So you yourself may never have thought to create these pages for all of these areas of medical malpractice. But this firm ranks number one on SEO for Google because they do talk about this. And again, it creates that sense of trust because someone may say, well, I have a podiatrist claim. Is that something I can use for medical malpractice? Or I have a pharmacy claim. Is that something I can use with medical malpractice? So they have these practice area pages, they have these blogs that are constantly updating and things like that. So don't just think in terms of you. Don't just think in terms of, well, I talked about medical malpractice, it's on my site. Think about who else your competitors are and Google who your competitors are because you may not realize who your competitors have become if you're not doing this kind of extra research. All right, moving on to the next one, Allison. We're going to talk about making sure your content is up to date and fresh, which we can't stress enough. It's something that's really important to look at. So, Allison, could you break this down for us?
It is, like you were just talking about, you need to be adding content to the website on a regular basis. And we know that it can be a headache, and we know all the reasons why that might be hard for you to do. But that's why our blogging services exist. That's why our writing services exist, social media, right? You need to do something, whatever it is, to be able to post consistently to your law firm website. What I think one of the easiest ways to do that, of course, is blogging. And I want to show you some examples of maybe you're in a period where you can't post frequently and you're supposed to, but you're also going to fail at it. All of our blog posts typically have a timestamp, right? Consider removing the timestamp, or maybe change it to the month. Maybe have it say November 2024, or maybe if you're really in a rut, have it say winter 2024. Something that's still going to, give it some sort of chronological order and let the system, kind of process them, but maybe it's a little more of a vague qualifier there. That's one way you can get around it. Also, another piece of content you can add to your website on a regular basis that's maybe not a blog, that's maybe not as cumbersome, is your client successes. You're obviously going to work every day, you're closing cases, things are happening. Take 5 minutes to write down what it was that happened in the case that made it successful, or make the attorney do it as in kind of like right, it's like a benefit to them because it's something we can link up to their bio. It's something that can easily be turned into like, PR material touting that attorney's ability. The case studies on your website is the one thing PaperStreet really can't do for you, right? You only you know what it was that you did and why it was significant and why it had an impact for the person that you were working for. And being able to get that material on your website is such a huge thing and really one of the best things you can do. So if you can, find a way to work it into your process, make it part of your closing meeting, have you hand over the check and then the attorney goes back to their desks and needs to write down, what happened and submit it to whoever needs to review it. And then you forward that to our help desk to post. It could really, be that streamlined and that easy. So whatever you could do to post on a regular basis to your website is really going to help you in the long term.
Absolutely, because there's nothing worse than, and I do this when I'm doing my evaluations. Like I'll take a look at the client success pages and I'm like, you're talking about successes that happened 12 years ago. Okay.
Right.
That may have been a landmark case for you. But if that's the case, break down how you display this information. So showcase that 12 years ago, you revolutionized the field in divorce law. Absolutely. But if that's all you've got, and this is 2024, and that's from 2012, it's going to look like, well, what have you done in the past? Are you out of business? Is this slowing down for you? Why have you not won anything since? So
Yes.
it's important to realize that you can keep the older information there if it's particularly important to you. Like, let's say you were the keynote speaker for the ADA conference. Certainly don't hide it, but find a way to distribute it on your site so that it showcases, yes, this was older. We know that it was a big deal, but then
Yep.
here's all the things that we've been up to date since then, because it's so important to show that. Because again, you can show why you're the best, but then you also need to go show them that you're still doing this to begin with. So, like I said,
Yeah.
if you're really having a tough time of balancing that, like you have really important blogs that still need to show, because it's, as Allison said, you're not going to want your blog post to still be featured if it was 5 years old or something like that. You can have a place that says important articles and then new articles. So that way you are able to provide new information, but still showcase what's really important. And like I said, that's something that the lawyers I've spoken to really have to create a balancing act for. But that's why you talk to somebody that can help you display that sort of information best.
Yeah. You have
All
to think
right.
too about like the message that it sends, right? It makes you relevant. The Today, nobody does not understand how to use a computer, how to use social media, right? How to find somebody. And if you're comparing two websites and somebody hasn't done anything since 2012 and somebody posted something yesterday, that's a no-brainer. I wouldn't hire. So we're recently looking at doctor websites, and if it looks old and you haven't touched it, it's almost like, are you still in business? Are you still relevant?
Mhm.
Like, do you still do a good job? I'm not sure. So even from that perspective, you want to make sure everybody knows that, you are the expert. It's the best way to do it.
Absolutely. I feel like we could talk about an hour about why you need to keep your website up to date too. Let's do this to content. I'm sure you guys all have places to be. All right. So number 9 is really important on our top 10 list. Our number 9 list is going to be tracking the value of your content with something like Google Analytics. Now, once again, this is a podcast topic that could probably be its own topic for about an hour and a half. And we've talked about Google Analytics before. But the thing is that Google Analytics is free. Okay. Very important. Google Analytics is free. You could probably set it up for your own website. If not, you could touch a base with a support team that could probably do it in an hour tops and things like that. The point is Google Analytics will show you things about your content that you may not be thinking about. So, for example, let's say somebody's going to your homepage and then never contacts you. Does that mean your site page is out of date? Does it not talk about your practice areas? Do your bios, do they have something called a high bounce rate? So, does somebody look at your bio and then choose not to hire you? What are they seeing that they don't like? So things like bounce rate, exit rate, and conversion rate are super important for you. So like conversion rate would say, oh, this page does really well on your site. So I'm going to take a look and I'm going to see that. So for those of you, like I said, who are watching this on video, I'm going to share my screen. For those of you who are listening, like I said, check us out on YouTube or just try to follow along. But what we have is at PaperStreet, we use something called agency analytics, and that helps us track down how you're doing with Google Analytics and a little bit more. That being said, if you don't use PaperStreet and you're just looking at Google Analytics, this sort of information is there for you as well. So you can see when you're using things like Google Analytics, it's like who's finding your site via search, who's just typing in your name directly, are your pay-per-click ads working? Are your social media content getting new users? Things like that. So you can get an overall content picture for everything on your site using Google Analytics. And then again, if you're not watching this on YouTube and you're just listening, you can see it tracks things like your acquisition. Who is your audience? What pages are successful? Who is completing an event, which means who's actually signing up for your newsletter? Who's actually converting and submitting a contact form, who's using click to call, things like that. Because once again, I've said this a million times on podcasts, and hopefully you've listened to my other shows so you know that. But when I do these shows, I always say, with websites, there is no such thing as set it and forget it. Because if you do that, your website will not continue to do well. You need to see, are people reading to this content? Do they spend 5 minutes on the page? Great, you've hooked them. That means they're probably going to contact you or they're using this as a source of information. If they're spending 6 seconds on your site, it probably looks terrible. It probably talks about the wrong topic. It probably doesn't have a good flow. There's something wrong. So, the best way to do that, again, take yourself out of your head. Stop being so tunnel vision that you're only looking at your site for yourself Try to figure out what people are doing with your website. So figure out what is successful, what is not successful. Oh, we are appearing on search. Maybe we should try harder with that. Oh, our paid search numbers are terrible. Maybe we need to take that off. There's a bunch of statistics that you could be looking for with your Google Analytics. Again, it's free. And you can have some in your office do the online training for Google Analytics. Let's say you don't want to pay an agency. If you work with someone like PaperStreet, we could do it for you. You don't have the budget, you don't have the funds for that. Somebody could take one of the HubSpot courses, the LinkedIn courses, or Udemy. Those cheaper courses are always really cheap. To take a quick overview course on Google Analytics to really better understand how the content is on your site. Because why keep writing? Why spend month after month, hours of your precious time on content if it's just not working? So it's really important that you do that. And then last but not least, we talked about this a little bit, but it's not just about the words on a page. There is some other elements that's slightly design based, but pay attention to the visual and the experience of the content to your site. And Allison, can you break that down for us?
Yeah, so a lot of pages on your site are going to be longer, sometimes 1,000 to 2,000 words each. There's only a handful of people that are reading that 2,000 word page. Me, your editor, your writer, you, the approver, and Google, really. Your users scan things. That's why it's so important to use those bullets and those headers. They're kind of looking through the page to the information that they need or the information that they're interested in. They read that little section, right? And they kind of move on. And so when you're planning out those longer pages, using what we call kind of like page interrupters, things like images, videos, calls to action are going to help kind of chunk out that content. And these are some great examples. This firm does a really good job at using those kind of design interrupters. This is a kind of like a pull call out, call to action. They use the bullets here. They have their related case studies that you can click through and read, video features, more calls to action. You can also do this with really long pages with kind of just page formatting. So thinking like if you want to put things in two columns, for example, or you break things up with like a little mini graphic. All of these things help to make the page a little more digestible when they're really, really long. Even stock images, you have access to, what is it, iStock, right? That we use, embedding those images, of course, put your alt tags in and your captions, but you can use those and break up pages as well. It makes what was once a really long and cumbersome page to look at a lot easier to scan, scroll down, and digest.
Absolutely. And it's really important too because like sometimes somebody say, "Uh-oh, I don't want to read all this." But when if they quickly like especially because most clients are looking at your firm on a cell phone. If they quickly scroll up and down with their phone, but they see, "Oh, there's a video. Oh, there's color. Oh, there's an infographic." They
Right.
may like digest it better and say, "Okay, I'm going to look through this," because they see that there's going to be something interesting on the page as opposed to that panic of, "Oh, I'm not going to read all this. I'm just going to go somewhere else." Because again, everyone has that instantaneous, especially if they're double screening on their cell phone and watching TV, anything like that. And remember, people are looking at it on your phone as well. So I feel like sudden message number
Good point.
11 is don't forget you need to make sure your content looks good on mobile. So
Yeah, that's a
that was
great
just
point.
kind of a bonus tip that's in there for you. So like I said, there's so much more to content that you could talk about, and Allison and I could probably talk about for hours. But hopefully, these 10 tips are just things that every firm can keep in mind, no matter your practice area, no matter your location, things like that. And again, content is the kind of thing that you can really teach yourself if you do the proper training. You read the courses on things like Google Analytics, the SEO formatting, the how to write well. Make sure you know how to use grammar, things like that. Don't use chat gpt to write all your website content. That could be another just podcast for another day. But just make sure that it's written on a human level. And then like I said, there's always ways to talk to an agency or content writers and things like that to make sure your content comes out the way that you need it to. All right, well, that's a wrap for 2024 of our podcasts. We hope you all have a wonderful upcoming holiday season, and we have more tips to talk about in 2025. Thanks, Allison.
Take care.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye bye.